Thank you. The Honourable Stephen Miles MP, Deputy Premier and Minister for State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning, event partners and guests, welcome to the Queensland Media Club. I'm Peter Kelly from 3plus and I'll be sharing the MC duties today with Lane Calcutt from Channel 9. We're able to present these events only with the support of a long list of sponsors, and I'd like to acknowledge them now. Our naming rights sponsors are Brisbane Airport Corporation, the operator of Brisbane Airport, the multi-award-winning premier gateway to Queensland. Dial Before You Dig, a national referral service for information on the location of utilities, underground assets anywhere in Australia. And Griffith University, created to be a different kind of university, challenging conventions, creating bold new trends and pioneering solutions. Ranked in the top 2% of universities worldwide, its future-focused degrees are developed in consultation with industry, based on cutting-edge research and taught by Australia's most awarded teachers. Please welcome our naming rights sponsors. Our season partner is Arrow Energy, an integrated coal seam gas company working to meet domestic and international demand for cleaner energy. And our club partners are Telstra, whose purpose is to build a connected future so everyone can thrive, with a long and proud history of contributing to Queensland's economic and social development. Telstra is committed to staying close to its customers and providing them with the best experience, delivering the best tech on the best network. Shell QGC, one of Australia's leading natural gas producers, focused on developing Queensland's world-class onshore gas reserves. And New Hope Group, a majority Queensland-based diversified energy company with business interests and operations spanning coal mining, agriculture, exploration, port operation, oil and innovative technologies. And finally, the Queensland Futures Institute, a unique partnership of academic, business, community and social services, government, industry and research organisations that seek to foster economic and social growth through collaborative public policy reform. Please thank our season and club partners. Our venue partner is the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre, named the world's best convention centre. This venue was one of the first in Australia to reopen under a COVID-safe plan approved by Queensland Health, and it continues to host successful events, providing assurance and confidence to the industry. And finally, the managers of the Queensland Media Club, 3plus, specialists in risk and reputation management, as well as strategic communications. Please thank our venue partners and our managers. This is the final event of the current Queensland Media Club season. We will be back in the new financial year with a new season, and I'm pleased to announce that our naming rights sponsors, Dial Before You Dig, Griffith University and Brisbane Airport Corporation, will all be back next year, along with a number of seasoned sponsors who are joining us for the first time, among them the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland and also Technology One. We'd like to welcome them to the club in the new year. We're also looking for additional partners to the club, and if you're interested, please speak to me or any of the QMC team this afternoon before you leave. Please enjoy your meal. We'll be back after lunch where Lane will hear from the Deputy Premier, and Lane Calcutt from Channel 9 will lead the media conference. Thanks very much.
My name is Lane Calcutt from 9 News, and it's my pleasure, actually it's my duty, to introduce the guest speaker this afternoon. As you heard, Stephen Miles is Queensland's Deputy Premier, Minister for State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning. As a former Health Minister, he led the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic alongside Queensland's Chief Health Officer and our next Governor, Jeanette Young. In his new role, Stephen wants to leverage that world-best health response, his words, not mine, to focus on Queensland's economic response and get more Queenslanders back to work. His aim over the next 4 years is to create good, secure jobs, his words, not mine, for Queenslanders by supporting the industries the state was built on and investing in new industries that create new jobs and new opportunities. Again, as a working journalist, his words, not mine. To hear how he plans to do that, would you please welcome Stephen Miles. You mean business, jacket off, tie off, sleeves roll up?
Good afternoon, everyone. I didn't actually write my own bio, Lane, so they're someone else's words, but thanks for the clarification. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and of course, any First Nations people who are with us today. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Queensland Media Club. It's my first time here, so it'd be nice to me. But I am looking forward to this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Today is 511 days since we first declared a health emergency here in Queensland, one of the first jurisdictions to do so. And you might wonder why I'm not the health minister anymore and I'm still counting. And that's, well, first of all, because I have an app on my phone that does it for me, but second of all, because no matter where you are in the world right now, your economy and your society is shaped by the context of where you are in the COVID pandemic. And so no matter what role you have in a government, for example, the COVID defines where you are and what opportunities you have. It did change the world. And it strikes me that we are very fortunate here in Queensland. And I don't say lucky because it wasn't luck at all. It was the difficult decisions that our Premier made, and it was Queenslanders who followed them that allowed us to get to where we are now. And those sacrifices have provided our state with an incredible head start, an economic head start that I think we owe it to ourselves to take advantage of. And that's the focus the Premier has asked me in this new role to take on, to use that head start, that world-class health response to create more and better jobs for Queenslanders. And my agency, State Development, has a proud history of supporting new industries, helping existing industries to grow, of creating jobs. You know, in the past, it was called the Department of Grunt. And now, I think, combining state development with those very extensive powers of the Coordinator General, our commercial property development arm, economic development, Queensland, our planning powers, our infrastructure planning work, along with local government and my role as Deputy Premier, and now with the Queensland Jobs Fund, the mechanism to deliver. And so taking all of that together, I believe that we have this massive opportunity to turbocharge job creation in this state. And there's evidence already that our economic recovery plan is working. Last month, we created 32,000 jobs here in Queensland, more than 1,000 new jobs each and every day, bringing our unemployment rate down to 5.4%, below the level it was before the pandemic, which should generate considerable optimism right across our state, and that's what I see travelling right across our state. And at the same time as we have this fantastic opportunity, 3 major projects that have been some time in the works achieve very significant milestones. So the $5.4 billion Cross River Rail project, 5 new or upgraded inner city stations, as well as 3 new stations on the Gold Coast that will connect our high growth residential areas to our economic centres where the jobs are. That project will allow us to run extra trains on existing lines, including where I live on the Redcliffe line, but as well, it will allow us to consider future expansions to the rail network that is just not possible at the moment because of that cross-river capacity constraint. It will allow us to consider new busways, and of course it will connect to the Brisbane City Council's Brisbane Metro project. And then the second major project that is achieving milestones is Queen's Wharf, and hopefully on your way here you might have seen the span of the new walking bridge, the Neville Bonner Bridge from South Brisbane. There's one span now in place on this side of the river, and we closed the expressway at the weekend to put in a 40-odd metre span over the expressway. That project will continue to speed up from here. So right now there are 700 workers on site delivering that $3.6 billion project, but by this time next year there will be 1,500, and when it's open we expect 1.4 million visitors to that precinct. It's 79 weeks from starting to open. And I want you to think about this. We went 20 years in Brisbane without a new 5 or 6 star hotel. We've had a few since then. But from that commencement of opening at Queen's Wharf, there will be 6 new 5 or 6 star hotels opened every quarter for 6 consecutive quarters. Those 2 projects alone will transform our city. And they were instrumental in the third that I'd like to talk about, and that of course is the opportunity to host the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games here. And that's an amazing opportunity to lock in a 10-year pipeline of region-changing infrastructure like those projects I've talked about. It'll be a boon for local business, and we're determined to make sure that those local procurement opportunities are locked in. Of course, there'll be a focus on the tourism opportunity and those visitor nights that will come with the Games, but I think the greatest opportunity of it is that it locks all 3 levels of government into a single objective, regardless of what happens with electoral cycles over that time. It gives certainty to business, but I think more importantly ensures that we are aligned and will be continuing to work together towards the same objective. The master planning for the Games will need to leverage our existing infrastructure and also plan what new infrastructure is required. You'll have heard we've already announced that the Gabba will be the main stadium for the opening and closing ceremonies and the track and field events. We've called it a redevelopment, but it's actually a rebuild. You know, that stadium will be largely demolished and rebuilt, as well as a concourse connecting it to the Gabba Cross River Rail Station, as I say, underlining just how those infrastructure projects were enabling for the Olympics bid. Last week, the Treasurer delivered a budget which really was an update to our economic recovery plan. It locked in our commitment to $52.2 billion worth of infrastructure over the forward estimates. It locked in our $1 billion Works for Queensland program. But I'm most excited about the $3.34 billion Queensland Jobs Fund. It's the element that I worked most closely on, and it will allow us to aggressively compete with other states, indeed other countries, to attract investment here to our state, to encourage our existing industries and businesses to expand and employ more Queenslanders, but also to attract new businesses to either start here or move here. It's all about creating more and better jobs for Queenslanders. It includes the the Industry Partnership Program, a $350 million investment to allow us to partner with industry to create those new jobs. The first $20 million of which we have said will go to the Translational Research Institute to create the Translational Manufacturing Institute. Over 10 years, that will create 500 jobs, but more importantly, it will allow us to manufacture here what our researchers and scientists are already inventing here. To stand with Ian Fraser and have him say that he wishes the next Gardasil could not just be invented here, but trialled here and manufactured here. We should have sovereign vaccine manufacturing capability, and that investment that's what that investment is all about. The Queensland Jobs Fund also includes $2 billion for a new renewable energy and hydrogen jobs fund. There is an energy revolution underway now, and Queensland has an opportunity to lead it. Hydrogen is a way that we can export our surplus, cheap, renewable energy, but we also want to use it here where we can, to process our minerals, to manufacture here locally. If you think about previous energy booms, and Queensland's seen a few, we've in the past taken our cheap, plentiful energy and our plentiful minerals and sent them both to a port on a ship to the same place, where they have put them together to manufacture goods that we've then brought back. And we have an opportunity now, I think, to process the minerals here for the economy of the future, the supply chains that go into renewables and into storage. 50% of the world's lithium ore, that key ingredient for batteries, comes from Australia, and we export it at a value of $130 million a year. Other countries then manufacture it into $2.2 billion worth of goods. And so the opportunity for us to take that cheap, plentiful energy and our minerals to be part of the supply chain of the future means lots of jobs for Queenslanders. Queenslanders like Elizabeth. Some of you might remember baby Elizabeth. She was our 5 millionth Queenslander who I welcomed at the RBWH a couple of years ago. By 2041, the Southeast will be home to 5.4 million people. And right now we're seeing a domestic and interstate migration surge, as well as a surge of demand for greenfield property generated by the home builder scheme. And that's why one of the first things I did in this role was to create the Growth Areas team, putting the State Planner and Economic Development Queensland together to work with local government and developers to unlock that extra land so there are places for the people who are moving here to live. We announced that the first of their new growth areas would be Caboolture West, and we anticipate announcing the second new growth area later this week. So I was invited today to talk, I think, largely about voluntary assisted dying and our work in that area. I felt obliged as State Development Minister to make sure I talked to you some about how important the work we're doing in state development is. But voluntary assisted dying is also important, and it's a very significant responsibility that I feel to lead that alongside the Premier and the Health Minister and the Attorney General. And I feel that responsibility for all of those Queenslanders who die in pain and who want more control and more choice over the timing of their death. And I hope that we pass those laws in September. I hope we pass them with a sufficient majority so that their ongoing existence doesn't get questioned. I'd hate to think that somebody with a terminal illness would have to consider that an election was coming up and that might change the choices that they have at the end of their life. I also think it's an opportunity to honour the very significant contribution of my friend Duncan Pegg, who delivered, I think, one of the most powerful speeches I've ever seen where he touched on this topic. It was his final speech to the Parliament. And I want to read a section of it to you in case you didn't see it. Duncan said, "People with terminal illnesses do not want to die, they want to live. They want to live every day. I personally fight to live every day. There are so many positive stories of people successfully fighting cancer. However, if you are diagnosed as terminal, then ultimately you are going to face death. People with terminal illnesses want to have an option. I will not tell members how to make a conscience vote, but before making a decision, I encourage every MP in this place to make sure they speak to and listen to people with terminal illnesses and their families. I think if you do that, you will get a clear consensus view." And I thought that was a pretty powerful call to arms. The process that we've undergone to get to where we are now and the process we intend to follow between now and the debate on the bill, I think gives us the best possible chance of passing these laws. It's not unlike the process we followed with the termination of pregnancy laws, which we passed in 2018. It's a big social change, not unlike the termination of pregnancy laws, and I think what the Premier has done very well on both of those is taken Queenslanders on a journey that started with a very lengthy parliamentary inquiry, a referral then to the Queensland Law Reform Commission, a commitment at the election that we would bring forward laws, a very thoughtful and thorough report from the Law Reform Commission and proposed laws, another parliamentary inquiry process that is about to kick off. They will then report again before a lengthy and fulsome debate in the Parliament later in the year. And I think, as I say, that gives us the best possible chance of passing those laws. Voluntary assisted dying is less controversial than termination of pregnancy was. I think roughly 80% of Queenslanders are in favour of it. I suspect that's because men die too. I think it's important that we don't just take for granted that it will pass, though. And so it's important for us as media and community leaders, business leaders, to be able to clearly communicate what these laws will and won't do. They will require two medical professionals to assess that a person meets the very strict eligibility requirements, including decision-making capacity. They do require that it is voluntary, that the person is dying and will likely die within 12 months, and that they are experiencing a degree of suffering that they consider intolerable. It will bring Queensland into line with Victoria and Western Australia, South Australia and Tasmania, who all now have voluntary assisted dying regimes either in place or legislated. A lot of people in the debate and discussion will try to characterise voluntary assisted dying as an alternative to palliative care, and it really isn't. Palliative care, good palliative care, should start for every patient as soon as they receive a terminal diagnosis. There will be many, many people who receive palliative care and at a point in that journey ask their doctor to have the choice over the timing of their death. In fact, we know from Victoria that many people will be receiving palliative care, will commence that process, will be approved for voluntary assisted dying, but will die before they take the medication. As I've outlined, the bill is the result of very extensive consultation. The Queensland Law Reform Commission have done an incredible job. The safeguards included in their bill, I think, make it the best of the legislation that we've seen so far. And if it's passed in September, we will take 15 months to implement it after which Queenslanders who are dying in pain will have access to it. Now, in the public debate so far, two issues have been highlighted, and so I think it's important that we address those. They are conscientious objections for institutions where people live or are receiving care. And the other is the federal laws, Commonwealth laws, that relate to the use of a carriage service to assist suicide. Now, on the second, these Commonwealth laws were introduced at a time when activists were encouraging people to end their life through the mail. And while it made sense for that to be legislated against, now that we are looking at putting in place a scheme that will be legal and that will allow a safeguarded framework, it is important that it is equally accessible to all Queenslanders. Queensland leads the world in telehealth. There are many parts of this state where you cannot access healthcare and will not be able to access medical professionals trained to do these assessments without access to telehealth. And so it's incredibly important that the Commonwealth Government amend those laws to ensure that equitability of access. On the first, the Queensland Law Reform Commission considered in very great detail how the conscientious objection provisions should work. And they provided a mechanism by which individual practitioners can make a decision about whether they will or won't participate in a process, and what process should be available for them to refer a patient into a process where they might be able to access that care. Now, in the case of institutions, and we are largely talking here aged care facilities, hospitals or hospices, it provides a mechanism whereby institutions can declare their conscientious objection, but that they have to either transfer a patient or resident to another facility if it's practical to do so, or allow access for a health practitioner to their facility where a patient or resident has requested access to voluntary assisted dying. And it's really important to balance the conscientious objection of the institution with the need to equitably provide access for all Queenslanders regardless of where they live. And while for the institution that location might be their building, to the Queenslander in that building it is their home. And so they should have the same access to that treatment in their home. And that's why the Law Reform Commission has made that recommendation, and I support it strongly. I think generally the proposal so far has been very well received. The Premier's been very clear that she's eager for this to be a respectful debate, and it has been so far, and I'm grateful for that. So there you have it, a speech in two parts, state development and voluntary assisted dying. I want to thank you for the opportunity to give it these chances to compose one's thoughts in more length. Are quite rare, but they are really valuable for us, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to answer your questions, whether they are Lane's words or not.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for your speech. Some of them will be my words, some won't. Just on the VAD, you talked about wanting to get a clear majority. What's your sense at the moment about how the vote might go? I mean, I know it's difficult. Each member will have a conscience vote. There is so much for each member to consider, from what their electorates are telling them, from their own religious, ethical, moral beliefs. What do you think? How do you think it'll go?
Look, a lot of people have said they still want to see that process come to its conclusion, and so we provided the committee with twice the normal time to consult. I really hope it passes. I think I hope I conveyed there. And the point I was just trying to make was, in a unicameral parliament like ours, the risk of a change of government changing the law is real and significant. And I would hate for someone to feel rushed to access voluntary assisted dying because they think there's an election coming and that there might be a change of government. And so I really hope we get a sufficient majority so that it's kind of set in stone, and that it's unlikely to be visited. The history of these kind of social changes tends to be that, but I think it's a real thing to be concerned about. Is
it an issue that people are talking about? I'm just wondering if you're picking up anything in your own electorate, or what your own voters are saying to you.
It is. I think this is one where politicians are probably somewhat behind the community. I think the community have supported programs like this for a long time, and you see that in the surveys. I think even if when we released the report and the bill, I think you guys ran it kind of fourth or fifth story, like it wasn't even seen as a big deal. All of our elected officers are getting a lot of correspondence, but it does tend to be form letters from one side or the other. So look, I think most MPs are holding kind of town halls where they're hearing from people, and even there they're getting a pretty overwhelming response in favour. And again, I hope that bodes well for the debate.
Do you think it will be a respectful debate in the House during the legislation?
I think so, and I hope so. I think, and I said this to one of the church leaders recently. We come to different positions on it, but motivated by the same care and concern for human life. We've come to a different conclusion about it, but it is inspired by the same motivation to not see people in suffering at the end of their life where that can be avoided.
Thanks, Evan. We might throw it open to media Q&A if somebody on the media table has one.
Oh, it works. Hello, Lydia Lynch from The Australian. You touched on your speech about the option for religious affiliated organisations to object to assisted dying. If they do, they have to organise a transfer or have another practitioner come in. My question is, in those situations where the patient is too sick to be moved, or you're in a remote or regional part of the state where there aren't an endless list of practitioners to come in, will those religious affiliated organisations be required to provide assisted dying? And if so, what will be the penalty if they do not?
Well, they'll be required to provide access to a health practitioner who will provide that service. It's really important. This issue is really important. That's why I touched on it in the speech. I've said a lot over, particularly the time I was health minister, about the aged care industry and the way they've treated their residents. I think we need to remember that these are people who are, in most cases, paying to live there. The federal government is paying these institutions for them to live there. It is their home. They probably didn't get much choice in where they ended up. They went to the aged care facility that came up when their moment on the list came up, and so I think it's pretty extraordinary to say that they shouldn't have the same access to this as people who might be in an aged care facility owned by someone else. If you think about people in pain and distress, there are many scenarios where transferring them to a hospital or a hospice just isn't fair to them. And so I think it's really important that they have that access. I think the Law Reform Commission has considered it in a lot of detail and really come up with a system that balances the rights of those institutions, and I accept that, but where the person in that building lives there, I think we need to consider it also as their residence.
Hi, Jessica Marslick with the Courier Mail. Just not on BOD, but on another one that deals with the economy. You were the Environment Minister when the government passed its land management laws and did work on the Reef 2050 plan. There's news today that plan hasn't had the desired impact and that UNESCO is looking at downgrading its listing to in danger. What impact would that have on Queensland's tourism economy, and what is the Queensland government doing to try and stop that downgrading from happening?
Thanks, Jess. It's an incredibly important question, and nobody should underestimate the gravity of what that recommendation means for our state and for our tourism industry. We hope there are tens of thousands of people around the world saving their holiday money to come here and see the reef when borders reopen. And what happens if you're no longer World Heritage listed, which is the threat here, is you drop off a lot of people's bucket lists. They use those World Heritage listings to determine whether something is really worth the holiday of a lifetime the tens of thousands of dollars it costs a lot of people to travel halfway around the world to come here and see the reef. And when we were elected and I became Environment Minister in 2015, we were facing down the same prospect. Queensland was facing down the same prospect. And, I put political differences aside, and Greg Hunt and I worked together. We amended the 2050 plan for the reef, and then we lobbied around the world to convince them that that plan would address the threats to the reef. And the threats are many. Queensland is primarily responsible for the water quality elements of that plan, and we are investing significantly. Our farmers are doing a really great job of reducing their pollution impacts, their water quality, runoff, sediment, pesticides, nutrients. But then the other considerations are climate change and diplomacy. And if you think about it, who knows what Australia's climate change policy is today? Is it different from yesterday? Does Barnaby Joyce change it? How can you seriously expect the world to think that we have a policy that will address the climate impacts on the reef? And then on diplomacy, only the Morrison government could blame their own ham-fisted diplomacy with China for the delisting of the reef. Like, that's what they tried to do. That's what they tried to do this morning. It's quite incredible. I think it's critical for Queensland that this is taken really seriously. Greg Hunt is still a minister. The Prime Minister's in quarantine, as I understand it. He should have Greg and DFAT and the Environment Minister on Zoom right now working on a plan to deal with this. It's that important. And Queensland, of course, will work with them again to do that as we did in 2015. And, I was pretty proud of that outcome.
Do you believe UNESCO got it right? Is it that bad?
Look, there's no doubt that climate change in particular, the warming of the oceans, but also the acidification that's caused by the absorption of CO2 into the water, is threatening the reef. And the World Heritage Committee has been pretty clear that they will take into account the steps that member nations are taking to address climate change when they assess whether their natural assets stay on the World Heritage List. And so it's entirely reasonable for them to take that into account. What I think has been missing is the level of diplomatic engagement that we had in 2015. Greg and Julie Bishop and I were using the entire DFAT network, global network, first of all, we had to get the plan right. Like, it was a scientific and environmental task first, but then there is a diplomatic task, which is convincing countries you're serious about addressing it. And, it seems to me that hasn't happened. I was completely surprised by that outcome. I understand it was published on The Australian at 9:32 last night. The Commonwealth Minister rang our Minister at 9:40 last night after it had been published. I read about it in the paper this morning as someone pretty engaged and interested in the topic.
Hello, Marlena Watt from 7 News.
Hello, Marlena.
Hey,
This will be short, Minister. I've warned it before.
Is your words, Marlena?
yeah. Just back on the VAD legislation, and particularly for those issues facing people in regional and rural parts of the state, how are you going to protect people from those Commonwealth laws, given the Commonwealth doesn't appear to be budging on that?
Look, really, it's about protecting the doctors that are involved. We will provide advice and guidance, as Victoria has, about what you can and can't under those laws discuss on a telehealth consult. We want to make sure that, first of all, only a small number of doctors are likely to do the training and be accredited. So even if you're in a bigger town with a decent number of doctors, the chances of you having two in your town are pretty slim. And so telehealth will be really important. Other states have provided guidance about how far you can go in discussing it. I should say, the federal law says that you can't use a carriage service to assist suicide. We are very clear that this isn't suicide. So the law will require that the cause of death is the underlying illness that the person was suffering from. The law will apply the same thing for the purposes of life insurance, for example. So it's contested amongst the lawyers about how this will apply. I think the most important thing, though, is to give certainty to doctors so that they can deliver these services. If we can't, then there'll be parts of Queensland that will miss out until we can.
Hello, Rachel Rieger from ABC News. Yesterday, Dr. Jeanette Young said that by the time she becomes governor in November, she'd like to see the vaccine available to all Queenslanders aged 16 years and over. When is the government going to start opening up the age groups to younger Queenslanders? And are we shoring up vaccine supply with the federal government in terms of getting access to Pfizer?
So we'll vaccinate as many Queenslanders as we can, according to the amount of vaccine we have that we're allowed to give them for their age cohort. And we're doing that right now. The ramp up has been quite dramatic, but as I think you've heard commentary today, there is a concern about how long that Pfizer stock will last. There is big supplies of Pfizer expected, I think, at the end of Q3, which as well as Novavax and potential alternatives. We'd love to be further along, but there's only so much Pfizer in the country. We're getting it out as quickly as we possibly can. I think there's a lesson for the country in it, though. I think the fact we can only manufacture one platform, one vaccine technology here, leaves us begging around the world for leftovers from other countries when we should be able to manufacture it here. We did in the past, and that's been a focus of our effort.
Yeah. Hi, Felicity Caldwell from Brisbane Times. Criteria tabled at National Cabinet around national quarantine facilities includes that they should be 1 hour from a tertiary hospital, that effectively rules out the Wellcamp proposal. Is it time to give up on Wellcamp? And is the government seriously considering any other sites? And if so, where?
Well, it's not time to give up on Wellcamp, Felicity, because we've just this week had new cases of COVID that have got out of hotel quarantine, and I'm kind of sick of talking about this. I've been saying I was one of the people. I was on the teleconference where we agreed to start doing hotel quarantine, and I'm very proud of it. It kept the country safe, but it was not designed to be in place for 18 months, and that's what we're on track for now. It was certainly not designed to deal with these new, highly contagious strains. The Wellcamp proposal, we still think, is a very good one, but I don't get why the government just keeps coming up with new reasons why it's not good enough. Like, first of all, it wasn't enough pages. We put in more pages. Then it needed an airport, and we told them there was an airport. They said it couldn't be in the desert. We said it wasn't in the desert. Now it has to be a certain distance from a certain type of hospital. Well, Toowoomba Hospital is one of our best regional hospitals, but we also gave them great detail about how COVID-positive patients would be treated in the network of Brisbane hospitals that we have currently treating COVID patients. So, look, I don't know why they keep coming up with excuses not to support our proposal when they jumped very quickly to support Victoria's proposal. And, if they don't like Wellcamp, then come to us with an alternative. Come to us with a defence property or a suitable property that you think will work, because, at the end of the day, we're doing the Commonwealth a favour in doing quarantine. It really should be their job.
But given the problems with hotel quarantine, the feds aren't going to buy Wellcamp. Have you not considered anywhere else in this? I don't think maybe Townsville with the army base there. It's meets all the other requirements that the feds have put on you.
Look, early on there was a scan of possible locations. Toowoomba was at Wellcamp was identified as the best one. That's why we pursued that. The Commonwealth could propose other locations instead of just saying, "Oh, we've come up with a new reason why Wellcamp won't work."
Anyone else? I think that just about does it. Stephen, thanks for your speech. Thanks for coming today. And would you please thank the Deputy Premier?
Thanks for having me. Thank you.